Sylvia, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you for joining us for this, the fourth episode of the Gathering podcast.
Oh, that's cool. I'm
These-
so happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. And the series is off to a great start. We've had so far, our mission, of course, is to share tips, tricks, anecdotes, anything that's helpful in perspective or comedy for people that support teams, right? So that's the whole thing of Gathering. And so far, we've had, people in charge of people from a VP level, large corporations. We've had technical recruiter. We just had a technical recruiter. And then some perspectives from the world of co-working as well. So the whole idea is to kind of give a full 360 on teams, team culture coming out of the pandemic, what hybrid looks like for people, all that jazz. So we'll see what we talk about. But to jump into it, Zulu Alpha Kilo.
Yes.
What did I just say? Break it down for us.
Break it down. Okay, so Zach, our founder, he parted ways and built his own firm, and it's been or agency, I should say.
Parted ways with what?
He was at Taxi, so
okay.
he had a prominent position, a great role at Taxi, and he decided that he wanted to go out and do his own thing about 14 years ago. And he did just that. And Zulu is, it's a beautiful place. Obviously, the core of what we do is a creative agency. So for some people, that means advertising. For others, it means other things. But I always like to speak in my own way, like what it means to me. And Zulu, to me, is a beautiful patchwork blanket of creative people with unique disciplines and lived experience coming together and creating this wicked work that we do. Some is really funny, some is really meaningful, but at the end of the day, it's to really support our clients and their growth and their vision. And we just believe that there should be more creativity in this world. And so that's what Zulu does.
And I'm just going to do this real quick. We'll go like that. And then I think that'll pick you up a little bit better.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so wait, okay, so that sounds beautiful.
Yes.
Right? You described
It
it
is.
very well. You work at the best place to work in the world. But yeah, so like what does Zulu Alpha Kilo specifically do
So
as is it an agency?
it is an advertising agency.
Advertising agency.
Like if I just feel like when we prefer to be a creative agency,
Right.
right?
Yeah, no one
But-
uses that word advertising anymore, right?
I don't know. Like some people find it icky.
Yeah.
I could go either way. I'm pretty flexible, but yeah, I think the basis of what we do is creativity, but it's obviously through strategy, through digital, through media, through the creative aspect, and that could be like copy and art direction to design and production and post-production. So we have all of those capabilities.
And what's the how big is this creative agency?
Yeah, so we spent the first 14 years here in Canada only. And this year was a very exciting year. And the reason I was joining is we opened up a Vancouver office, and we also opened up an office in New York City. So it's been
wow.
really, really incredible year for Zulu, both from that perspective, but also from the perspective of just doing some incredible work that got recognized on a global basis.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Example campaigns from that, like anything that you like particularly, let's say?
Yeah, like there's one that's come out right now, and I'm going to hopefully do it justice, but Remembrance Day is coming up.
Yes.
And we worked with Home Equity. And I guess the basis behind this campaign was that there are soldiers that have been in war, World War I, World War II, and they've lived across, our country. And we created this campaign where original letters by these soldiers were delivered to the neighborhoods of these soldiers across Canada.
Who might have totally different,
Yeah, like
inhabitants now who don't really know the history of their neighbors or
yes,
the
that
the
that
history
there
of
was
the
a
neighborhood.
soldier that lived in that
That's
neighborhood,
amazing.
and you can donate to this campaign through a digital poppy,
Mm-hmm.
which there's obviously a lot more strategy and conversation around how everything played out, but it's just a heartwarming, beautiful campaign to really demonstrate the importance of Remembrance Day,
Mm-hmm.
and a way to connect us all to our neighborhoods, like that. There was someone that lived in our neighborhood that fought for our country, maybe even lived in our own house, the house that we live in
Yeah.
today.
I think that's amazing. That is a cool campaign to have seen happen at the place where you work. It's
Hmm.
cool. It's always nice when the work that your company does has impact on society, right?
Hmm.
And that's also something interesting because in this day of hybrid realities and digital first and people kind of being distributed, and we'll get into kind of what that means for you guys. For the work to transcend that and bring stuff home. It's
Hmm.
kind of an undercurrent theme in some of the last few podcasts that we've done in the last couple of weeks. Is people really recommending in looking back on the success of their careers on camera, on mic here in the studio. A lot of people have been telling me about their success was, or they think, I guess, relying on old school tech is what people say over and over again. For success, and it's like. Connect people. It always comes back to community and people. And
Hmm.
that's also why, some of the backdrop of this series. So growth coming out of the pandemic for the organization,
Hmm.
100 plus people,
150 about.
150 people
Hmm.
across Canada with a footprint in New York, a pied-à-terre in Manhattan. That's really cool. And it's interesting because some of the teams that we've been talking to are globally distributed. Some of the teams are very kind of like local, but distributed across the city, right, in our
Hmm.
greater Toronto area that is so large. So let's talk a little bit about this kind of as the team has grown, how has that impacted the work or responsibilities on you for facilitating that and managing, sticking them together, connecting these people?
Hmm. Yeah, like for me, I'm the head of talent attraction. So, coming here, I've almost been with Zulu for a year
Hmm.
this month. And so
Congratulations.
thank you. And in the first 7, 8 months of joining here, I helped to build, you know, feet on the ground in Vancouver, New York City, as well as just like onboarding myself as a leader and getting my feet on the ground myself,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I would say like I was doing multiple things at the same time, helping the company like establish the basis that you need in order to be successful and scalable, right? But also, getting the word out that Zulu's growing, and
Right.
we're looking at talent in different markets, and quite frankly, looking at talent from around the world, like not just
Yeah, of
in the
course.
places that we have
Because you want the
offices.
best people,
Of course we do.
and they're everywhere.
They are everywhere. And so, that's an everyday thing in my life is how can I get more people to learn about Zulu, to think we're wickedly cool, to want to bring their beautiful being and craft to our essence, to our
Yeah.
building, whether it's a virtual building or in our office, and yeah, and to do great work.
Yeah, you get the best job. You
I
get to
do.
advertise the advertising company
Yes. Yes.
for
Yes.
the advertisers
Yes.
to do the advertise. It's all very meta and
Yes.
circular.
Yeah. I'm out
Um,
there.
but it's an interesting thing. How do you attract talent? I mean, is it outbound? Is it a mixture of things? Is it you're trying to position the content in places that people pick it up and say, "Wow, that's a cool agency. I want to see if I could work there."
Mm.
Um, is it yeah? What how do you do your job in terms of attract talent?
That's such a great question. Here, I'm going to tell you a secret.
Ooh,
You talk to people.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
I feel like yes, there's lots of channels to attract talent. You can post your jobs, you can have really great career pages. You can show up at events. I mean, there's so many ways to bring people to your attention, and vice versa. And but at the end of the day, it's about talking to people
Right.
and being
Right.
present and being available for them when they when they want to tell you their story, like why they want to join Zulu and how their craft is, what they're really good at. And so I think like trying to take the scariness out of recruitment. At the end of the day, I just tell recruiters to talk to as many people as you can,
Yeah.
and make that your daily habit. And that's not just like externally, that's also internally. There's so many great people you already have in your organization. And you could just say, hey, tell me about your favorite boss, or tell me about the best copywriter you've ever worked with.
Right.
So it
Because
it is.
creatives typically have their network of influence and peers,
Yeah.
and tapping into that also to build. I mean, this is the great dream, right? Is that every company is kind of made up of your best friends in some way.
Yes. Yes.
So you could have
Definitely.
fun every day, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's funny how like a lot of companies set up these sort of like curtains, walls, barriers, ultimately like forms of bureaucracy to get people in the door. And then most people are like, I don't want to do that work. Like, I'm not going to do the work. I'll do the work when I have the job. I'm not
Yes.
going to do the work to get the job.
Well, Zulu doesn't believe in spec.
Oh, I thought you were going to say work. Yeah.
At least here in Canada, we don't do spec work. So when it comes to like, I'll give you a great example. When you are part of our employeeship program, so you come in for the day, you show your stuff, it's competitive, I guess, because there's usually 20 students or, a group of students, and they're trying to get their first job. And so
This is like internship. You're
yeah,
talking.
it's kind
But you
of
call it employmentship.
because they actually get a job.
Oh,
They don't.
okay.
They're not
So
like
it's like
a
work
3-month
study.
contract. Yeah.
But this is like graduates, not people at school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so even them, they're paid for their time when they show up for those 8 hours that day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super interesting because I think the what I would say is that the potentiality for creationism through commercial means is greater than ever before, in the sense that we have a larger palette of media to work with. So the industry is exciting to participate in. Young graduates, new graduates coming into the workforce for the first time are probably surprised to find organizations like Zulu Alpha Kilo that are kind of like, wicked, let's do some cool stuff. And we want to see what you can do, and we want to see how you enjoy doing it, as opposed to this kind of like, task-based interview process kind of scrum that like conventional industry has. I can't even imagine what it takes to, get a job at WPP or something. But anyway.
Don't talk about them here.
Yeah. Who are those people?
Those big network agencies.
The amalgams, all the global amalgams of like 50,000 staff. We've had interactions with some of, maybe not WPP, but some other like super large globally distributed agencies that are part of these, amalgamated, federated, whatever-rated, overrated, massive agencies. And the one thing that always happens when we're dealing with them as StartWell, not hiring these people, but typically trying to facilitate their coming together, like booking meeting space and stuff for them, is the people that reach out to us from these organizations are so not empowered to be contacting us about even booking a meeting room. And it's just bureaucracy. It doesn't matter like what industry you're in. It's the same thing in every industry. So empowerment is super important because it means that people then can do good for each other, and that's at least from our lens.
That's one of the reasons I love Zulu, actually. And I mean that in the truest, purest way, that being in an independent agency, you really have the ability to put your fingerprint on the organization. Like that independence, that entrepreneurship is part of our everyday DNA at Zulu. And so whether you're a new joiner, like early in your career, to the most experienced people
Mm-hmm.
at Zulu, you have the opportunity to really make a difference there. And I think they notice that right from the employeeship. Like
Mm-hmm.
when they're doing that employeeship, everyone walks away, not one, everyone walks away going, oh my gosh, that really taught me something about how I'm going to have to show up in the interviews ahead of me, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think in any case, I think they walk away going, now I want to be at Zulu. Like
Mm-hmm.
if they didn't feel that before, which many do, and I don't want to come across as arrogant, but
Yeah.
they do follow us at school. They know about us before they come there. But when they come and have that experience,
Mm-hmm.
they know like this is going to make a difference in their career.
Yeah, it's like us downstairs and grabbing a cappuccino from the
And
barista,
your
right?
Chi-Bot, like, oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Yeah. We want people right when they walk in the door to be like, this is awesome. I'm going to have a great day.
Yes, I
So
felt it.
I'm
I felt
happy
it.
to hear that. Yeah. So 3 physical locations
Yes.
make up the kind of like offices. What are the offices like of your agency?
Well, I've joined during the pandemic,
Right.
and Zach did this really cool thing and bought a building in Leslieville.
Ah,
Yes. And actually, this past week or the week before, it's being renovated.
okay.
So we're in a spot where, places like yours
Yeah. Come in
are
handy, right?
come in
Yeah.
very, very handy because we are about to have probably several months ahead of us where it won't be a place where we can work, but we need places to work.
Mm-hmm.
So
We'll talk off camera about that more.
there you
But-
go, a sales pitch.
But this is really interesting. If the agency is kind of developing its own physical footprint and it's like design spec, I'm so intrigued to know what the experience of the employees is that's being,
Taken into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, designing employee experiences is really important in attracting talent,
Mhm.
right? So it goes from every touch point, from the moment they're in school, like, do they hear about you? Do they know you? To the moment they talk to a recruiter for the first time,
right.
to meeting the team, like, how does that all flow? How does it feel? To the first day walking in the office, how does that feel?
Yeah.
To onboarding and that experience, do they learn enough about your organization that they could sell your company, right?
Right.
To their manager and every touch point through that lived experience as a colleague, and it doesn't end there
No.
because your exit interview process should just be as flawless
Right.
as your recruitment process. And I think the best companies take it a little bit further and use the exit process as a way to learn, right? So how am I going to learn from what this employee has shared, good or bad, and either capitalize on it or have action, right? Because what if they hear something bad, And then if I were to plus that, you would go back to that employee and say, hey, here's what we did with your feedback. And I welcome you coming back and visiting us again, becoming a colleague. We have
Sure.
so many boomerangs at Zulu. So, when the whole employee experience is valued from, college or even earlier to the time that they're a part of your alumni, you've got magic. You've earned the right to attract people and to retain them.
For sure. How do the different cities that you're in relate to each other in terms of the kind of talent experience, employee experience?
Well, I'm the one, so it's probably pretty consistent. But as far as like what the employee experience would be like for each one of them, I would say that, there's different possibilities of benefits and translation of like what the employee might get from a payroll standpoint might be different because different countries have different.
Yeah, because each city is dealing with local clients is
Yep.
the idea.
Yep.
But as an employee of like, if I'm in Toronto and I work at Zach, I
Yeah,
work for Zach at Zach, um, and I'm like, you know what? I would love to go to Vancouver for 6 months.
that's possible.
And so they could work out of the Vancouver office, right?
You can work anywhere in the world.
Right.
But if you want to go to the Vancouver office or if you want to go to New York City, that's a yes.
How do the offices work, or what's the plan? I know you're in renovation for this Toronto one, but like, how will the offices work as talent attraction sites? Is that something that has a specific function?
I think so because, these are major sites, right? Like Vancouver kind of gets the West Coast. New York City helps us to build our international presence, right? We had it before, but it's just it does help it. It's a major market.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think when people join, it excites them at the idea that they might be working on a New York City client, but they're in Toronto.
Right.
Or it excites them that they might be in Vancouver and get to work on a Toronto client or New York City.
Hmm.
So yeah, it really helps with your talent attraction.
Now, you said in Leslieville here in Toronto, which for our international or out of Toronto listeners and viewers, let's break down the neighborhood because I think it's interesting to have a creative office in a residential or mixed use neighborhood. Are you guys on Queen Street?
Yeah, right at the corner of Queen and Logan, practically.
So that's a major east-west kind of artery that is typically ground floor commercial, residential, upstairs, classic old street in Toronto.
Beautiful.
A really nice little pocket neighborhood that's super close to the core, financial core, because in Toronto, the downtown typically has just been relevant to law firms, and banks, unfortunately. But yeah,
The financial district.
the financial district. Yeah, we don't call it downtown. We're all downtown, but they're in the financial district. So it's a cool place to actually rock up with an agency because historically, and the counterbalance is the history of this organization, which is Taxi. Agencies typically have been in the West, downtown West, right?
Yes. Yeah, I
And
feel like, well, we have a lot of the team that lives towards there, so I know that might have taken a play in it.
mhm,
But really, ultimately, Leslieville is a beautiful up and coming place.
mhm.
It has a mix of like boutique shops and restaurants all nearby. Um, the building itself is gorgeous. I love it. It's a two-story building, very high ceilings, big windows, and although I haven't seen the specs on like what it's going to look like
Oh,
post, I
okay.
haven't seen them yet. I'm probably going to get those shared shortly, I hope. But I imagine, well, what I know is going to happen is we worked with Deloitte and we've worked with great designers and such to make the experience of coming to the office much like yours,
Right, yeah. Fun,
fun and enjoyable. Like,
comfy.
yeah, like if you want to just sit at your desk and work, you can do that at home. We all know that. Like we just did it for the past 2.5 years.
Hmm.
So if you're coming to the office, it's got to be fun, creative, collaborative. It has to have big spaces where you can have big groups and strategy. So it will be fun. I can't wait to see it. I really can't.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, especially this idea of like being in a kind of comfy neighborhood sets the context for when you walk in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And having retail access as well. I mean, for us, for StartWell, it's always been the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The first StartWell that no one knows about, although I keep saying this like on the mic, so people who watch and listen will know about it. StartWell was originally in 2017. I started as a ground floor retail shop next to in St. Clair West, which is right where I live, down the road from my house, and it was a retail storefront. Communal neighborhood co-working was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Ahead of its time for Toronto. If maybe we had continued building these shops out post-pandemic, it would have been replaced all the Starbucks locations that closed down. But I was so adamant, and I have been so adamant that we have this connection to the neighborhood that first location, which only lasted 2 years, lease was up, we closed it, moved down here to King Street. But I got a check for like 20 grand as a seed investment from the butcher next door,
Get out.
just so that we would have like skin in the game in the neighborhood.
That's awesome.
When we closed it, I paid him back. and it was all good vibes. But it was really cool that the butcher owned part of the co-working space.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Shout out to Ben Latchford. Thanks, man.
Hi, Ben.
Best butcher in the city, roast. If anyone's looking for a butcher, I know it's not, it's gauche to be talking about meat these days, but
I am a vegetarian, just so you know.
see,
But I have meat eaters in my family,
There
and I
you go.
love them.
there you go. But yeah, okay. So bring it back. So retail and this idea of pedestrian flow, super important for me for the creative process and for inspiring people when they come into a building.
Yes.
And neighborhood vibes. So the other two offices in New York and in Vancouver, what's the setup? Are they?
Yeah, so the Vancouver one is kind of like we share, like that kind of environment. So we rent a space. We've outgrown the space,
Okay.
so we'll probably have an actual office. I'm assuming in the very near future.
Cool.
Our colleagues in New York are virtual, more on a virtual basis right now, but those discussions are also in place. So we'll be sharing that news
Nice.
as it arises. But yeah, like you have to have place like in these places, Vancouver, New York. You actually have to have an office. So we'll be having offices in the future as well.
It's interesting because in New York, speaking specifically about New York right now, it's such an exciting time for anyone looking for space because there's so many options available.
I've heard that.
And
Yeah.
the pricing is great, and so it's really kind of exciting. I would think for anyone in creative fields to be able to choose where they want to be. You actually have the choice. You didn't have it 4 years ago. Now there's like 30% vacancy rate, 40% vacancy rate in office space in Manhattan.
Maybe we'll save a little money too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I hope so.
Absolutely, you can. Yeah, no, there's so much, like so many papered up windows that like tons of retail's
I
available.
haven't been in a while, so I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be sad when I go.
I don't know. Like, look, I lived in New York in 2004,
Yeah.
2004-5, post 9/11, pretty close. So it was still kind of, they had that like dark vibe and Lower East Side and stuff. People were a little bit bummed out. But at the same time, it was still like I DJ'd at Twilo before it closed down, and all these kind of like really interesting spots that don't exist anymore, and saw a slice of that old New York that was still gritty. Like, there were very few white people in Harlem when I lived in Harlem. It hadn't quote unquote gentrified. People were throwing stones in the Starbucks window on 125th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard. And I was shocked once to see Fab Five Freddy walk in there and come out with a big latte. And so it was still that like old school, new school, sitting on the fence, New York. So when I go back these days, I mean, I always have this like, oh, I was there at a time, and it doesn't feel like there's a time in New York right now. But I think coming out of the pandemic, there's definitely something happening.
Yeah. Lots.
And for the YouTubers who might be watching this, of course, they'll know about Casey Neistat. Do you know who this chap is?
No.
Casey Neistat.
Am I not cool?
Well, I don't know.
I don't watch news. I'm just that type of person.
No, but this is the cool thing about the internet, internet days, right? So Casey Neistat is a filmmaker who's a very inspired by DIY ethos, right? Kind of skateboard culture and all this stuff, I think inspired a lot of his creativity. But since he was young, him and his brother basically were making films with whatever they could grab as equipment. And then that landed them a show on HBO. And it's a very I don't think many people know about this show, but they had a show, and they made all these cool pastiche whatever films, and that made up a show of all these little vignettes and little scenarios that they made. And then when YouTube came out, he basically was one of the first people to say, "Wow, this is not just a place for putting clips on," which YouTube was originally,
Yes,
right?
yep.
Here's a little clip I shot. He was making little videos. And they were just this hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm going there. And hey, there's a guy walked in my office. Let me talk to him. And he got really, he kind of almost formed the vernacular for what a vlog is. And gained great notoriety on YouTube as it attracted filmmaker and DIYers and vloggers as a kind of class of creator. So he was kind of ahead of the creator, capital C revolution, the online creator revolution, pre-social network, essentially. but kept vlogging and got, famous and has like 12 million followers and all sorts of different
I only have two
stuff.
buttons on my remote control. It's Netflix and YouTube.
Oh, they're going to say
Yeah.
forward and backward. I don't even
There's
have
no
the
cable in my
double
house.
forward, but do you remember that? I remember this on VHS or even on tapes. Like, it was very, very special if you had the double forward, super fast forward. And then
I
you
do have that
and
too.
you had to rewind the tape before you took it back to Blockbuster. Otherwise, they would charge you. They would charge you a rewind fee.
I actually just remembered that. I remember that because I actually did get charged. I
See?
remember that. Well, or my parents did.
It's like a bill that you never paid, and now you owe the government $10,000, and I don't know. But I brought. Why did I bring up Casey Neistat? Oh yeah, one of the things that I've been picking up on is the guy. Okay, so he basically his career trajectory is interesting, right? So he did all this film stuff, and then at a certain point, his aesthetic was very much about New York because he was based in New York, and all the videos that he was making were very Manhattan centric. I mean, the Boroughs a little bit, but he moved, and his family moved, I guess, out to the left coast. And that didn't last too long. And then the recent videos the guy's been posting are all about like, okay, we're going back to New York. We're in New York. And it's really cool because you could see the energy that he has for being back in the city
Yeah.
is obviously great because he's like back in the city he loves, right? In the same studio that he used to have. And so he's out there doing stuff, and everyone in Manhattan knows him. So when this guy rolls down the street on like
He's famous.
he's famous. He is. He's like vlogging on like Broadway, and people are like turning around, being like, Casey. I don't know how he hasn't been hit by a car. It's crazy. But so through those videos, I'm definitely seeing an interesting thing happening. I'm seeing like Casey Neistat fits into this old schooler YouTube culture, the old schooler or original, the OG creator class of YouTubers. And what I'm seeing is that there's almost like a new youth culture in New York where people are kind of like reclaiming the city because of the economic detritus, which I also saw, when I was there 20 years ago or whatever, not quite, but like 2004 or 5, the post 9/11. Because post 9/11, you had a lot of people like not come back from Connecticut. They were like, fuck this. I am not going to get blown up. I'm staying where it's safe. We got a pool. I'll spend time with my wife because, otherwise she'll divorce me. This is the third one. I need to make it work.
You know what I do think has happened?
Yeah.
Is I've seen more youth being able to live in the city, right? So when the pandemic happened and they were, exiting out of the city, maybe going to live with their parents or someone nearby, or maybe just getting out of the city because they've lost their job and it's just too hard to be on their own. But through the pandemic, that change in probably around April last year, where all of a sudden people were like a hot commodity. There was a need for talent. There was a need for them. And all of a sudden their salaries were increasing because they were able to demand more. And that has brought them back into the city because now they can afford it. So you talk about, and I don't know 100%, but, the change in the cost of renting and the vacancies in places probably like Toronto and New York. But what it has created is opportunity for youth to come into these places and live and work close by, where I remember for me, like I'm from Hamilton.
Okay.
The Hammer, for all
The
my
Hammer.
my Hammer folks out there. I've lived in Oakville for a long time now, but I'm from the Hammer, and I had to work in Toronto, and that was a long commute. I'm not gonna lie.
Coming in from the Hammer?
Yes.
Every day, back and forth?
Yes,
Wow.
of course.
That's what, an hour and a half?
At
More?
least, yeah. Sometimes
Traffic.
it just depends on, well, if you took the GO train versus your car. But I mean, even from Oakville these days, to come to Toronto is on average, like Leslieville, is an hour and 50 minutes for me.
Wow.
So, I think that that's an opportunity for people out there to really understand that the demographics in the cities are changing.
Yeah.
And what that could mean. Who knows? But I think that is something that companies and brands do need to think about when they're marketing and advertising to folks in the city.
Are there any trends that you're seeing in the talent pool that you're attracting and having conversations with uh, in terms of this, like, I want to be in an urban context near my coworkers versus I just want to focus and do my thing in my own world? Is there a dichotomy? Are they discrete identities, or
hmm
is
I
that
would
over
say that
speaking?
I'm hearing like this quite a bit. That like people want to work where they want to work,
Hmm.
right? So that might be at their home. That might be in Mexico,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That might be with their family in Barcelona. And I think the hardest thing that companies, face because of this is the time zone thing, right? So
Yeah.
if someone is, in a 5-hour time difference to your office that they reside for, do work for, client work for, um, what's their flexibility? Like, will they work on Eastern Standard Time, or, when they shut down at 5, that might be 7 o'clock, 7,
Oh
8,
yeah, it's a weird
might
thing. It's like, okay, you want to surf in Croatia as your like lifestyle? That's great, but you can only do it at nighttime.
that won't happen, right?
Hmm.
But I feel like going back to designing experiences
Yeah.
for our colleagues, I feel like we have to think about that a lot more today than we did 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even. So this is something that is on the top of minds
Yeah.
of leaders, HR people, 100%, and of course, talent people, because we need to tell a story
Hmm.
of why you want to be here.
Yeah, and then there's workflow things to that, right? Like how you, especially technology, how you're utilizing technology to enable your distributed workforce to be able to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
work together.
Yep.
For creatives, is obviously like amazing cloud-based tools these days, not just for like chatting with each other, but even like working off the same, like, I don't know. Some of our listeners may see this because if they're part of the Google atmosphere, or otherwise now I think even Microsoft has adopted this kind of thing. But like the idea of collaborating on a document together, and you could see the other person working on it at the same
Yes.
time. You could do that with video editing. Like we use DaVinci Resolve. You could get DaVinci Resolve on-prem or like cloud-based server stuff, and be editing a film clip together,
Mm-hmm.
distributed. And you could do that, of course, with I think with Adobe's Creative Suite as well. But the idea that like people can kind of jam on the same thing no matter
Yep.
what medium it is really really powerful for this.
Yeah, we use Teams, and you have the same kind of capability. You can
Okay.
see someone's in there and typing while you are. But when you're designing experiences for your colleagues,
Hmm.
you're looking at the physical. Like when you go to an office, what does it feel like? How do employees interact? What's the code of conduct? You're thinking about all of that.
Right.
But then there's the cultural, like why do people show up here? What's so awesome about this place? How do I feel? Do I belong?
Mm.
To the technological, right? So does my systems and all of the things that I use, all the tools I use, does it make my job enjoyable, fun,
Hmm.
fast? Because
Hmm.
I want to get out at 5. I want to go
Right.
surf in Vancouver. So yeah, like when you're designing experiences and offices and everything, you have to think about all of those things.
And on that meta note, like especially dealing with distributed or hybrid teams, people that might be coming together in offices, different cities, or not at all. Are you guys thinking forward in terms of like gathering the whole team once a year somewhere ideal, or doing team-based offsites in particular cities?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our clients are kind of like obviously come here for that in Toronto when they're gathering in the city, and are otherwise like people like Shopify. You have teams that are basically they have set budgets for their offsites, and they
Mm-hmm.
all choose together. They're like, you know what? None of us have been to, I don't know, anywhere, wherever, Buenos Aires.
That
Let's
sounds
go,
lovely.
right? And you'll have like a team from like I don't know Wales go to Buenos Aires.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're a special example. Maybe their budgets are higher than others, but
I think.
just a little
But
bit.
yeah, 100%. Like we've thought about like Christmas parties or what we call moments that matter. when can we be together for those moments that matter? And that's why our offices are going to be designed with that in mind. Like, this is a moment that matters. You're here, you're doing a rehearsal, you're meeting a client, you're doing a big strategy session, you're cuddling together closer than to your team meetings rather than being on camera.
Just take the cubicles out of the washrooms.
We have washrooms too, but there's no cubicles in the washroom.
No, what I meant is the dividers. It's like just a room full of open toilets, Share that moment.
I don't think we're going down that design way.
People are not that free, and it's not the 70s. Yeah.
Did they do that in the 70s?
No, it was 60s. There you go.
Really?
Those hippies pooing together.
I don't think so. Unless they were, Woodstock. But no, I think we're going to. You were talking about the design of offices.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think like the spaces will suit the needs of who we're
moments that matter. That's kind of
and
where
moments
you were
that matter. Yeah. So that's right. Moments that matter, like the needs for those moments that matter. So we'll probably have a variety of different size spaces, ones that can hold really large teams or really large groups to maybe really intimate little spots. Like we have these really cool egg chairs. I hope they don't get rid of them. Otherwise, Zach, I want to buy one. But like they're just like this little capsule that you sit in and you feel like you're in your own little world, but you can still see everybody hustling around.
It's a great experience. Yeah.
I love those egg chairs. So I hope we don't get rid of them. But we'll have those kinds of soft seating and all sorts of.
But the idea there is actually an important one. It's something that we're pretty focused on. Is this idea of variable privacy. And like, is privacy in different contexts? Privacy that you need for whatever you need. It may be auditory. It may be visual. It might be. It's like multi-sensorial. This idea of privacy. You might not want to smell people's lunch, but be in the lunchroom. Like I want to eat, but I don't want to smell your food. I don't know. That's just a random example.
I don't know if we've designed our offices like that, but that's a cool idea.
Yeah. Honestly, these are the things I think about. But it's very cool to hear that the agency's growing and that you're able to attract global talent, especially to a Canadian company. I think is really cool. Is there anything that you'd say to that note? The brand of Canada, and does it play into your process?
You know what? When I think about Toronto and here in our founding office, Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in our country.
Country, state, city.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, West Coast.
It's like the Vatican. But yeah, no, absolutely.
Toronto, the country.
Yeah, the ethnic diversity per capita in Toronto, the city, which feels like a country because it's so big, is
I misspoke.
It's almost bar none in the world. Like, it's true.
But the great thing about Toronto is the diversity, right? Yeah. And that world stage, those world views are all right here. So I feel like that's wonderful. We have that here. I don't know if we have it in every office. So, making sure that when we are recruiting, no matter where we are, whether it is Toronto, Vancouver, New York City, or someone totally remote, it's bringing those different perspectives, those different lived experiences to our organization, and that diversity matters. But even more importantly is that we create an environment where they're heard and seen and feel like they belong. Right. So that's the harder part. It's quite, in Toronto, there are a lot of places you can look around and say, hey, there's a lot of really diverse talent out here, but attracting them to our industry first and foremost, right? Because that's a historical thing. And then attracting them to Zulu. And then once you have folks joining, that everyone feels like they belong.
Yeah. A place for the people. And a place where every person's voice is authentically welcome And I think
100%.
right, and like
Hmm.
this is a great paradox. That's why it's funny to use the word advertising, because I think in today's age, it's especially with the mediums at play, it's easier than ever to encourage authentic narrative and communication with customers for brands, right? This is the whole thing. Brands can be living, breathing things finally. It's not just cigarette ads in the back of the magazine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the one brand that I've had my eye on for a while, but was most proud of was Patagonia,
Yeah,
and what I saw, what they did, and when they had put out that narrative that the Earth, the world, is their new shareholder,
right.
I like my mouth dropped. Like, and when I read Yvonne's message and I was reading through it, immediately in my mind, I was like, not only is this the coolest thing,
Hmm.
like they're in the business of purpose,
Hmm.
I think is what the language he used. But imagine what that did for their company that day. Like if you were in the mood for a new hoodie,
Hmm.
I bet you went to Patagonia's website.
Right.
If you were thinking about, I'm ready to make a change and I want to be at a place that my values are mattered.
Hmm.
I bet you if your values aligned to Patagonia,
Right.
you looked at their job site that day. Like that was such a monumental change in how brands can show up and how how what your brand message means and how that translates into every aspect of your business, whether it's the joy in the work and the products that you're delivering, to the joy that you bring by having someone join your company that shares your values.
Hmm.
It's just, that's one example of many that have kind of come up and said, hey, I also believe in this. Like Lululemon, I think they bought like a piece of land or have a piece of land in Vancouver, and they're really
It's like conservation land.
trying to protect it. Yeah, like trying to protect this land for future generations. And
Yeah.
those are all really important. And Lululemon is a Canadian brand, so I really respect that.
Oh yeah. No, I think there's definitely an undercurrent in Canada of people, hopefully because of our connection to land, given that this country is so large, so we traverse it often
Hmm.
as urban dwellers visiting other cities. But yeah, I think the idea of our connectivity to land is an important one, because I think not only in the sense of stewardship, but in the acceptance of change as a natural phenomenon,
Hmm.
and in shared space. For us here at StartWell, is something I think about. The idea that though this is an internal atmosphere, this is a inside of a building experience that we offer, right? And unfortunately, I pay a pound of flesh every month to rent it, to offer it then to other people. And this is also goes back to your idea or the story of you guys owning your own office is really interesting, right? Because it gives the organization so much more power to utilize that asset, that real estate, in so many different ways.
Yeah, it adds to our independence.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Hmm.
And so I think that's interesting. I think definitely I've heard of Canadian companies, a number of them that are doing this. Um, I think it's part of our culture to respect nature, to celebrate diversity, and lift people up. And I hope that a lot of our audience is traditionally with StartWell. It comes from the startup community and tech community. And I think the pandemic and the recession that we're going through, and the lack of fluidity in capital sources for VC backed companies, is kind of a reckoning for people to go back to this bootstrap mentality of understanding what cash flow is and focusing on sustainability. And so
Yes.
if sustainability is a core principle in business, then it can naturally support the people that make the business,
Hmm.
and hopefully positively impact their sense of empowerment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said about, having a building that you're proud of, when I think about walking down streets of Toronto and I see like someone paints the outside of their building, someone decorates, with lights or a sign, I think of that interconnectedness
Hmm.
of ourselves and our brands and even just value. So when brands like StartWell, when you walk, when you like I joked about, I would have loved to peer in your window and see what it looks like at night or such.
Yeah.
But like what you're really saying is that I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be part of this community. I want to show you because I'm going to, clean this building up. I'm going to decorate the front. You're going to be proud to walk down the street because I care.
Hmm.
And I think that's what good brands do. They care not only about their brand, their people, how they show up for their customers, but they also care about their communities and how they show up for their community. So kudos to you. I loved the front of your building. I loved walking in. and I'm sure that your customers feel it too.
We hope so.
Hmm.
That's been the experience so far. That's the feedback we get, and it only gets better. Like every year, our patio gets better in the summer, and it's more welcoming to the neighbors. And we enjoy seeing people come, even if they're not our customers, to sit on our picnic tables and like
Oh,
enjoy
that's
the
so nice.
evening and watch the sun go down and stuff. So yeah, well, thank you for coming in. It was such a
It's
nice
my
time
pleasure.
talking. I'm sure there's lots in our conversation that our audience will enjoy, and let's welcome them to contact us if you have any questions and you're watching this or listening to this. Feel free to jump over to startwell.co and use the contact form to drop us a line. If there's anything that listeners or viewers want to ask about, what would you recommend for them to contact you directly or contact Zulu
Yeah.
Alpha Kilo?
Well, I would say, there's this big network called LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll find me there, Sylvia Smiley. So please go check it out, and reach out to me if you wish to talk more.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put the link in the show page for this one.
Thank you.
Awesome. It was absolutely a pleasure.
It was so nice. Thank you so much.
Of course.